Warning: the game we will be looking at in today's video, Outlast Whistleblower, includes violent and disturbing themes such as blood, gore, strong sexual content, and jump scares. If you are uneasy or sensitive to such content, it is recommended that you do not watch this video. If you do decide to continue, viewer discretion is strongly advised. So about 8 months later, we were treated to a story expansion for Outlast titled Outlast Whistleblower. The expansion serves as both a prequel and tie-in to the original game with a different story from a different character's perspective. Now the biggest question is Outlast Whistleblower just as scary as the original game? Well, let's find out. So Whistleblower starts off with our character being strapped to a chair and beaten by one of the doctors as he receives the morphogenic engine treatment. We then cut to 2 hours before these events. The character's name turns out to be Wayland Park, a software engineer who agreed to a 2-week consulting deal with Murkoff to maintain the programming of the morphogenic engine. After witnessing the inhumane experiments Murkoff was supporting, Wayland decided to expose the company to the public by sending emails to multiple investigative journalists, including Miles Upshur. So yeah, this guy was the one who sent the message Miles reads in the beginning of the original game. Gotta say, that's some pretty cool continuity. After sending his last email, Wayland makes his way to the main console of the engine and works his software magic on fixing the interface. During this time, one of the patients by the name of Eddie Gluskin is being dragged out to be subjected to the engine, but breaks free from his captors and runs up to the glass barrier begging for his life, even looking at Wayland as if he's the one who can stop the experiment. After a brief moment of surprise, Gluskin is once again restrained and Wayland continues his work debugging the software. After completing his work, Wayland leaves the terminal and heads back to the room he was hiding in and sending emails, only to find his supervisor along with a few security guards waiting for him. Wayland's supervisor, named Jeremy Blair, insults Park for his attempt at secretly and discreetly trying to expose the inhumane experiments being performed at the asylum, before having his guards knock him out to be used for experimentation. We then cut back to the current time where Wayland is being subjected to the treatment, only to be freed from his restraints after the wall rider broke free and chaos started ensuing in the lab, with the variants breaking out and causing havoc. After witnessing 2 of the other patients being murdered by the wall rider, Wayland grabs the camera in the room that was used to record his treatment and starts making his escape. During his escape, he makes his way in the vents and overhears a conversation from 2 security guards, with one of them mentioning a shortwave radio in a tower nearby. As Wayland makes his way through the lab, he comes across a cannibalistic variant consuming a dead body. A file you pick up reveals the cannibal's name to be Frank Manera, who stalks Wayland later on. After avoiding Manera for an extended amount of time, Wayland makes his way to the morgue. As he searches for a way out, Manera bursts through a door and restrains Wayland onto a table. He takes his buzzsaw, but before he could kill him, he had another idea of cooking him in one of the furnaces. Wayland finds that the wall in the furnace is weak and breaks it down with force to escape. After roaming around the lab and continuing to avoid Manera, Wayland eventually finds his way out from the lab and escapes. After escaping Manera, Wayland makes his way to the prison's recreational area, where he comes across the naked twins from the original game. After avoiding the twins and some other variants who wanted to harm him, Wayland climbs his way up to the top of the rec center, where he enters the building leading to the cell block and finds the shortwave radio. However, just when Wayland was about to call for help on the radio, Jeremy Blair strikes down Wayland and destroys the radio. Blair then tries to kill Wayland on the spot, but then hears Chris Walker coming, so he runs off, leaving Wayland at the mercy of Walker. After being chased by Walker around the cell block for some time, Miles manages to escape through the window of a nearby hall that leads to the prison's drying grounds. While in the drying grounds, he makes his way around until he comes across an electric gate. He turns off the power, but then the power somehow comes back on. He goes back to turn the power back off and— oh, Jesus Christ! Anyway, after escaping the variant, Wayland continues his way around the prison's drying grounds until he makes his way up a nearby tower. After reaching the top of the tower, Wayland tries to jump to the next building over, but lands on a plank and hangs on for his life. But the plank fails and Wayland falls through the roof of the building in the vocational block. While in the vocational block, Wayland is stalked and chased by a variant by the name of Dennis, or better known as Dissociative Dennis. And as the name suggests, Dennis suffers from dissociative identity disorder elevator and has 4 different identities. He is chased by Dennis at the top floor of the building until he escapes and makes it to a descending staircase leading to a lower floor of the vocational block. But he escapes one psychopath only to run into another, and that psycho is none other than Eddie Gluskin. The same Eddie Gluskin we saw at the beginning of the game. Gluskin, who suffered from the physical and mental effects caused by the morphogenic engine, sees Waylon as his next possible bride, referring to him as darling and beloved. Eddie chases down Waylon throughout the floor until he reaches an elevator and jumps to a ladder, which collapses and causes Waylon to fall on top of the elevator, injuring his leg, which sticks with him for the remainder of the game. Gluskin then tries to kill Waylon by crushing him to death by lifting the elevator, but Waylon escapes through an opening to the lower floor. An injured Waylon continues to limp throughout the floor, avoiding Gluskin. He then finds a locker to hide in, only for Gluskin to find him and lock him in, keeping him trapped and escorting him to an undisclosed location in the vocational block. Gluskin then uses some sort of gas to knock Waylon out while he's trapped in the locker. 12 hours pass and Waylon wakes up to Gluskin and a variant restrained on a table. Throughout this sequence, Gluskin brutally castrates the variant alive and performs brutal methods of surgery to make him into an ideal bride. However, after some time, Gluskin gives up on the variant and brutally murders him by giving him a splitting headache with the buzzsaw on the table. Waylon passes out in the locker and wakes up naked, strapped to the table. Gluskin tries to castrate him with the buzzsaw, but before he could, a random variant saves Waylon by running up from behind and attacking Gluskin, which breaks the restraints and frees Waylon. The variant and Gluskin fight for a brief moment before the former punches him and Gluskin chases him down. Waylon takes this opportunity to grab his camera and find a way out, only for Gluskin to find him and chase him down. Waylon finds a nearby window and jumps out despite his leg injury and escapes Gluskin once again, with him throwing insults at him before he runs away. Waylon makes his way to another part of the vocational block where he finds a locked exit gate which can lead him to the main entrance of the asylum. As he searches for the key, he looks around and finds out that the area is Gluskin's personal killing ground where he has his past victims hanging from the ceiling of the gym. Waylon eventually finds the key, only for Gluskin to find him and chase him down one last time. Waylon escapes Gluskin and makes his way to the gate, only for Gluskin to catch up to him and apprehend him. Gluskin mercilessly beats Waylon to a pulp and throws him in the gym and tries to kill Waylon once and for all via hanging. However, with the use of a QTE, Waylon manages to wiggle his way around, which damages the pulley system and tangles Gluskin up on the ropes, which lifts him up and impales him on a spike in the ceiling. Gluskin utters his final words, claiming that him and Waylon could have been beautiful together before letting him go and impaling him even further, killing him. Waylon then escapes the vocational center and finds his way back to the main halls of the asylum entrance. He finds the chapel on fire, which of course was caused by our very own Father Martin. As he makes his way through the halls, he comes across members of Murkoff's tactical division who have pulled Richard Traeger's body out of the elevator and even showed some pity towards him. After the soldiers left, Waylon overhears from one of the PMCs that they have been given orders to shoot on sight and kill anything that moves. We also hear gunshots and screams of death throughout the halls, so Waylon quickly tries to make his way out before he's caught. Waylon eventually makes it to the entrance of the asylum and finds an injured Jeremy Blair at the entrance, who wonders how Waylon is still alive and asks him for his help. As Waylon tries to escape, ignoring Blair's pleas, Blair springs up and injures Waylon by stabbing him with a knife. Blair wants to kill Waylon to make sure word of what happened at the asylum never gets out, but before he could deliver the finishing blow, the Wall Rider appears out of nowhere and lifts Blair up in the air. He then rips his body apart from the inside, causing his blood and organs to splatter all over Waylon. Waylon then makes his escape by exiting the asylum's main entrance and towards Miles' Jeep, which was still parked at the main entrance. Waylon enters the car and starts the engine, but notices a limping Miles Upshur, possessed by the Wall Rider and surrounded by a large swarm of nanites. The swarm then starts to expand, causing Waylon to start the car and drive through the asylum's gates, escaping the nanite storm. Sometime later, Waylon meets with a mysterious agent associated with a media leaking organization. The agent informs Waylon that he has enough evidence on his camera to expose Murkoff's inhumane practices and even do irrevocable damage to the company, but also warns him that he and his family will be in great danger as they will be prime targets on Murkoff's hit list for damaging the company's reputation. Despite a moment of hesitation, Waylon ultimately takes the risk and uploads the evidence to the leak website, and the game ends. Despite being shorter than the original game, Whistleblower does a really good job with telling the story from a different character's perspective, in addition to having moments where it ties into the main story. Now, I may not have too much to talk about Whistleblower compared to the original game, but let's look at what the expansion still offers. Now just to get this out of the way, the gameplay for Whistleblower isn't any different from the original. All the controls are the same, the gameplay elements are the same, and you still have the same type of collectibles such as the files and notes. However, unlike Miles, who opens and closes doors pretty quickly and slams them, Wayland Park actually gently closes the doors, preventing any noise from being made. On the other hand, in terms of environment, enemies, new areas, and scares, it's definitely a different experience. Almost every area you go through in the game is a new area of the asylum you've never experienced before in the original game. There are a couple of familiar areas from the first game, but the level designs are slightly different considering this takes place hours before the events of the original Outlast. And that's one of the biggest things about Whistleblower. Since the beginning of the expansion takes place a few hours before and even at the start of the Asylum massacre, you experience the calm before the storm. You'll see regular people who aren't completely insane with their first instinct being to kill you. I mean, there's still corrupt individuals working on a sinister company's payroll, funding an inhumane project, but it felt strange playing a game like Outlast where everyone has a screw or two loose, but then you play the beginning of Whistleblower and see people talk and discuss like regular people. But then cut to the start of the massacre. You see variants beating up and brutally killing doctors and security guards. You'll also see guards and Murkoff employees running away and blocking off your escape path thinking of you as a variant. You'll even hear some survivors working together and interacting with each other to escape at a distance.
I made it! I think it's safe. Can you climb up? I'm coming, Cooper! I just have to lock the... There. I'm coming! Hold on!
It's honestly a cool take seeing and hearing how these individuals react and deal with the situation of the breakout at its early stages, not to mention being a part of the beginning of the riot itself. Trying to survive while not knowing which variant will kill you or just leave you alone, traveling throughout the floors and finding an exit path only for it to be blocked off and knowing that no one will actually help you once again shows how terrifying the feeling of isolation adds to the terror this game delivers. The unpredictability of the variants just continues to add on in this expansion. There's little to no rehashing of the behavior of any variants from the original game. Practically every variant was built with new AI and unpredictability that differs from the original game. For example, in the original game, whenever you see a variant sitting down in terror, you don't see them jump up at you and start to chase you down. Well, except this one guy in the beginning of the game, but anything after that you don't really experience again. However, in Whistleblower, after leaving the group of variants who killed a doctor, you're walking down a hall in the next room and all of a sudden this one variant sitting on a chair springs up and starts chasing you down. Or this one variant you see playing basketball with a severed head on the court of the rec center. Then when you make your way around the court, he throws the head at you and starts slowly walking after you to assault you. I love that Red Barrels answered the call to give us more content, but also putting in work and effort to make it a whole new experience and not just some cheap cash grab with an unnecessary story. But I will admit, they did kind of overdid it on the jump scares a bit. It seems like in certain parts of the game, they try to get you more with jump scares where one happens after the other. I mean, don't get me wrong, they are terrifying, like this one dude who comes from the shadows and throws himself on the fence. Or this one moment where you're crawling under the fence to get to the tower only for a body to drop from above. Jump scares can be necessary when making a horror game, but it shouldn't be overdone. I mean, the original Outlast did have jump scares, but most of them didn't happen one after the other. Some happen in moments where nothing bad has happened and you're used to the moment of serenity until a dude comes out of the corner and attacks you. Hell, some of the jump scares in the original game happened during a moment in the story where it fit with the moment, such as when you retrieve your camera and you turn to your left, then all of a sudden, a group of variants are standing there and it starts a chase sequence. But in Whistleblower, some of the jump scares are just there to give you a quick scare, but the added unpredictability of the variants does tend to make up for it somewhat, plus they mainly happen in the first half of the DLC. I also like that they brought back characters from the original game into the DLC for small segments, such as Chris Walker and even the Naked Twins. Hell, even Father Martin makes an appearance where he uses bloody finger paint to leave a message that we saw in the original game. Traeger's corpse also makes an appearance too, which I think adds some pretty good continuity where the PMCs think of him as a victim and not knowing his true intentions. The War Rider also appears in the beginning a few times to attack Wayland, but you can get away from it pretty easily and it doesn't chase you down as long as it did in the original game. But Whistleblower also introduces original unique variants with their own personalities who weren't in the original game. Such as the cannibal Frank Monero, who uses a buzzsaw to kill his victims and views Wayland as nothing more than food rather than an actual person. Then you've got Dissociative Dennis, a variant with 4 different personas. What makes it terrifying is that before being confronted by him in person, you think there's 4 separate separate people. But then you find out it's just one guy with a different voice and personality for each persona, which adds to the creepiness of the situation. And of course, everyone's favorite groom, Eddie Gluskin. Not only is he so insane to the point where he sees you and other male variants as potential brides and literally makes them into females in his own sick, fucked up way, but the fact that he talks with such a charming, caring, and gentlemanlike demeanor one moment, then turns around and becomes violent, aggressive, and throws out misogynistic insults towards Waylon when he tries to escape his grasp. You feel really creeped out from this guy the moment you run into him in his lair up to the last moment when you kill him. But when you see him in the beginning begging for his life, you see what he was like before the morphogenic engine fucked him up. He saw Waylon as another man and even put faith in him to stop the treatment, but the next time we see him, we see the real effects of his psyche after the treatment, as he clearly doesn't even recognize Waylon. It's just terrifying to think that the morphogenic engine has the capability of turning somebody into something like this. But one thing I definitely love about Whistleblower is the opposite feeling you get from the beginning to the end of the expansion compared to the original game. In Outlast, it starts off with a moment of serenity at the asylum gates, but once you enter the asylum, that's when the terror begins. And by the time you've reached the end of the game, you've practically experienced hell, and it gives you a feeling that at this point, it's hopeless to get out alive. However, in Whistleblower, you start off in that hell, but after the death of Gluskin and exiting the vocational block to make your way to the exit, you begin to feel peace and serenity. You walk through the halls of the main entrance as the morning sun glares through the windows, knowing that there's no more variants trying to kill you. Well, aside from this asshole, you hear the peaceful music in the background play, giving you the sense of that you've escaped the asylum's terror with your life. And after Blair's death, you walk through the entrance seeing the light after surviving in the darkness as you make your way down those steps into Miles's car. The music and atmosphere really deliver the impact of the last segment. Now, I've mentioned before in the last video that the music score with its ambience and themes that play when being chased or during a very intense moment just adds to the horror of this game and gives you sheer panic when it plays, which Whistleblower also does that too and delivers that panic the same way. But the score that plays as you make your way out, it just feels like a breath of fresh air. Outlast Whistleblower was the best expansion we got from Red Barrels after the community asked for more. I personally wouldn't say it's as scary as the original game, but it's definitely scary in its own right. It's a lot shorter compared to the original game, with it being only an hour long, but you'll still experience plenty of horror in that hour. With the continued unpredictability, new unsettling characters, still disturbing atmosphere, not to mention the impressive continuity between this and the original game, Whistleblower was made as a necessary expansion which gives players more to experience after the original game. If you want to play the full experience of the first Outlast game with its expansion, I'd recommend purchasing the Bundle of Terror, which is available on PlayStation Store, Microsoft Store, and the Switch eShop. They don't have the bundle on Steam for some odd reason, but you can still get the games separately. You can also get the games via the Outlast Trinity, a collection that includes Outlast, its Whistleblower expansion, and Outlast 2. It's also available on disc if you want a physical copy, and available on Xbox, PlayStation, and PC. But not for Switch. God, what's with the inconsistency in releases? Then again, Limited Run Games did make a limited physical release for Outlast 1 and Whistleblower. Outlast turns 10 years old next year and still holds up this past decade since its release in 2013. And replaying this game again just makes me even more excited for the Outlast trials. If you're a fan of survival horror, I would definitely recommend playing this game and its expansion. Well, it's nice to get that bundle of terror out of the way, and now that scary season is over, it's time for all of us to enjoy the holidays. Now keep an eye out in the next month or so, because the next game we're going to be looking at is Bleach Soul Resurrection for the PlayStation 3. I'm Wonder Subset, happy Halloween everyone, stay safe out there, and I hope you guys have a good night. I'll see you next time.